like to call a meeting to order. This is the August 22nd meeting of the Lowell Conservation Commission. Our order of business, we have no new projects for review, but we do have some other business here. The commission will review communication from the Division of Development staff relative to the recent Permit Extension Act and how the law will impact recent permits issued by the Conservation Commission.
Sure. So go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Aaron.
I just wanted to let the commission know about the act generally. We're doing this for all the boards, the zoning board, planning board, and the Conservation Commission, just to get a sense of what the extension of the Permit Extension Act means, what it means to old permits that were issued back as far as 2005. And specifically, there is a project that has come up that the Commission has reviewed recently for 51 Shirley Ave. I think the more recent project was 47 to 51 Shirley, where the order or the notice of intent that was filed was denied for the construction of a single family in the floodplain. In 2005, the Conservation Commission had issued an order of conditions approving a similar project, a single family new construction with the underground storage for flood compensation. At the time it was approved, it was before the DEP had taken action on a very similar project elsewhere in the city, where it was made clear that the underground storage was not considered to be a direct connection to the waterway that it was serving. So anyway, the Extension Act was originally passed in, I think it was 2010, as part of a economic development stimulus package at the state. And the idea was to, or I guess it recognized the fact that the financial crash, made it very difficult for financing for development projects, and that an automatic extension would help, if not spur economic development, it would prevent from hindering economic development at the time. Recently, this permit extension was extended by an act of the legislature. It's Chapter 238, Section 74 and 75. And what it does, in effect, is add an additional 2 years for a total 4 years of an extension for projects that were permitted within a certain time frame. So for Shirley Ave, it was permitted in 2005. The automatic tolling period for an order of conditions is 3 years. It was permitted, it was issued October 5th, 2005. So its original expiration date was October 5th, 2008. The original Extension Act extended that automatically to 2010. This extension of that extension adds another 2 years. It's what it in effect does is creates a 4-year extension for all projects that fit within that time frame. So that even though the order had expired on October 5th, 2010, it was in effect resurrected when this Extension Act was voted and signed in by the governor. And even though there was an open order of conditions already in place denying the most recent notice of intent, the fact that there was a second open order does not nullify the original one. Okay? I know this is kind of getting a little fuzzy, so please jump in at any time.
Aaron, just a clarifying question. If the subsequent application was denied because Mass General laws now prohibit underground storage as a means of managing stormwater runoff, is the intent of this act that just went into place to usurp any environmental laws that have come into place subsequent to that? In other words, if the applicant under that original order could meet the performance standard with the currently existing environmental laws, then I would see no issue with the the time window being extended. I don't think the authors of the legislation meant to completely undermine and usurp, new environmental laws. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can't speak to the intent of the legislature. I expect that that was not the intent. But the way the legislation is written is an automatic extension. It does not take into account any changes of performance standard, whether they're environmentally related, related to the building code, or related to a zoning code that's locally enacted. So a building permit that was issued at the same time, well, not exact same time, it's a much shorter tolling period, it's more like 6 months, but a building permit that was issued in the time frame actually would be working currently under a different building code standard, because there is a new building code in effect in the state of Massachusetts. And in fact, there's the city of Lowell is now under the stretch code. So to your question about performance standards, the permit is allowed to go forward under the performance standards that were allowed at the time that the permit was issued. So, although in this case, it does, overtake new performance standards and environmental protections, it's how it's written. It's how it needs to be applied.
Basically, it's an unintended consequence of the way the legislation was written.
Yeah, I would say so. This is probably a very unique case.
Okay, thank you.
We're reviewing all of the order of conditions that would potentially be affected by this most recent extension of the Permit Extension Act to see if there are any others that might pop up like this. My sense is that if there are, we would have already heard about it, because I think what's happening is civil engineers, consultants that have worked with applicants in the past are reaching out to their applicants, letting them know that they potentially have a project that is now still alive or still active. But we're going to go through that, and if there are any others that have been extended, we'll bring those up to the commission, probably the next meeting.
Now, in a case where the extension comes to an end in 2012, what is the trigger for that? If they've started work before the end of the extension period, they're allowed to continue, or what is it?
The project must be complete, and they must seek a certificate of compliance prior to the new expiration date, which is October 5th, 2012. They correct. The applicant has the opportunity to seek an extension through the Conservation Commission, as they would typically have the option with an active and open order, but they would have to file that request 30 days prior to the expiration date.
So they are allowed to file for an extension?
Correct.
And that would be potentially another 3 years.
Correct.
Into the future.
Yeah. That's correct.
In the case that all of the permits were not obtained with the old filing, how does that fit? If we're just talking about conservation,
Right.
What about the other permits?
So no building permit was ever filed for the project. So they have filed for a building permit application with the Division of Development Services this past Friday, but it is working under the current building code. It needs to go through the full project review process that happens when the building permit application is submitted to Development Services. Part of that is going through and making sure that everything, as far as the original order of conditions, have been dealt with. We have gone through the file and the plans to make sure that all the orders of condition, the conditions and the special conditions have been addressed. And thus far, it appears that everything is in order. We will need to be reviewing the building permit application to make sure that the building plans match what was approved with the order of conditions. So I guess the short answer is that there never was a building permit filed for this project originally. So it is not subject to this Extension Act, because it didn't exist when it was enacted.
However, since this conservation order has been extended, they're allowed to file for a building permit.
Correct.
Now, the building permit, if the new building rules don't match with the old plan, what is their recourse?
Well, if it's a building code issue, I believe they can always seek a variance through the BBRS, but the more likely scenario typically would be seeking an amendment to the original order of conditions through the Conservation Commission, depending on what the difference is. You know, if the difference has to do with insulation, and for some reason that needs to be changed, it probably wouldn't have any effect on what was approved in the order of conditions. However, if there was something that changed in terms of the shape of the building, the size, the footprint, height, you know, I think those are flow-through garage. You know, any vents that are located in this, it has to be designed to meet that. In fact, there's some specific conditions of the order that discuss the building elevation and the placement of the vents. So any variety between those two, between the building permit and the order, need to be addressed. If it meets the building code standard, what's presented from a building permit application perspective, then they would have to come back, the applicant would have to come back to the Conservation Commission to submit an amended or a revised plan that matches the building permit, if the plans for the building permit cannot be revised and still meet the building code. A lot of ifs, buts, and thens.
For clarification, you were saying earlier that they have to have the building constructed and get their certificate of compliance by October 5th, 2012?
Yeah, it needs to be completed. You know, my understanding of the Wetlands Protection Act is that the expiration date is not, the tolling period doesn't end if work begins. It's the end of work is what signifies a project is complete. A lot of times, as you know, certificates of compliance are not issued before an expiration date, but the project needs to be completed before that expiration date.
But this expiration date is October 5th, 2012.
Correct.
And they don't have the building permit. Is it, just as a practical matter, if the building permit isn't issued before October 5th, this whole issue becomes somewhat of a moot point, correct?
Correct, unless the applicant requests for an extension of the order and is granted that extension. Right, we haven't received anything yet.
Which they could, but
Good, right.
in that effort, you could look at potentially having the order of conditions also revised so that the work that would be performed would be in compliance with current environmental regulation.
Yes, my understanding of requests for extension are completely discretionary on the Conservation Commission's, from their perspective, from your perspective. So yes.
And just to be clear, the basis for denying the subsequent permit was the fact that the mode of managing stormwater runoff was underground storage, and that is no longer permitted under Mass environmental laws.
Yeah, just for a little clarification on that, it was denied on kind of there are two elements to it. One of them, that the flood capacity compensation was underground, was provided in part underground storage tanks, in which DEP does not consider to provide the direct connection, hydrological connection to the source flood water.
Right.
And it was also denied based on inadequate information. There were two reasons from the latest, but I think one of the key is my recollection of the vote was, what the key was, is that part of the compensation was underground.
Thank you.
That's my understanding. Well, DP hasn't expressed an opinion on how to proceed. They've basically indicated to me that once the applicant has chosen which order, just to take one quick step back, when there's a case of multiple open orders, the applicant or property owner has the opportunity to choose which one of those orders they can proceed under. In most cases, it's probably not quite as black and white for the applicant as this. But once they make that choice, formally to DEP, DEP will send us a formal letter, the Conservation Commission and the applicant, saying, okay, you've chosen to operate under this order of conditions. The other order that is open is essentially defunct. DEP will make sure that's defunct. Once that happens in this case, since the other order, it was appealed and was being reviewed by DEP under a superseding order of conditions, all they indicated to me was as soon as the letter goes out to us and we receive it, their involvement is no longer existent. So they don't really have an opinion per se.
So-
I can imagine what it is, but they're not, going on record, or they're not providing comments to us as staff or to the Conservation Commission as to how to proceed.
So the applicant will probably choose, obviously, this order that expires.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
only order he has. So he's going to choose that, and then he's going to come and ask for an extension. And if there is still underground storage tanks in there, that's our decision whether we allow it or not.
Correct. My understanding of a request for extension is that it's completely discretionary for the Conservation Commission to approve or deny those. I would expect that also means that you could amend those orders as well, and add additional conditions. Yeah. The applicant could choose to attempt to move forward to get the building permit and build and complete it by October 5th. There is that option. But I think practically speaking, 30 days, 45 days is not enough time to build a home.
So if they do come back for an extension and they're the same two problems, the underground storage tank still there and they have inadequate information, we still need to issue an extension though, right, based on the law?
No.
So could they come for an extension and we can still say we have the same problems we had a month ago and we're not extending this?
Correct.
And you have to build this now by October 5th, 2012, if we don't extend it?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, on this particular plan that was approved in 2005, I just want to comment that it appears that all but 2 of the large trees are designated to be saved on the plan. The 2 that are not, there's a comment written to be removed. And I know there was some cutting going on up there a couple of weeks ago, and I'd just like to put on record that we expect that the large trees will be saved, since that's printed on the plan.
I'll note that. I did drive by this afternoon just to see if there was any activity on the site since the last little bit of clearing. I didn't notice what trees had been cleared, or if there were larger ones that had been removed.
Did you see any trees?
There were trees. There were, yeah. But whether or not 1 or 2 that are shown on the plan still exist, I don't know for sure.
No, it's actually 1, 2, 3, at least 4 shown on the plan. Fairly large trees. Does anyone have any other questions or comments relative to the Extension Act?
Just a question, Aaron. So you folks right now are reviewing to see what other potential projects this potentially impacts, and we'll have a listing of that, and that way there's no surprises if an applicant, comes forward.
Yeah, we're going through for all the boards and the commission just to identify which ones may be impacted. I actually don't think there's going to be a whole lot, because for the most part, applicants have been moving forward on their projects. However, yes,
Okay.
we'd like to do this so there's no more surprises.
Okay.
I think, though, like I said earlier, I think this is probably the only one, because most consultants are reaching out to their clients, letting them know that they have it.
And just to be clear, in this case, you folks were made aware of this from the applicant?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
The applicant had stopped in the office to submit a building permit application, and that's what brought the whole.
So, to speculate a bit, you know, if the applicant does intend to proceed forward, we can expect probably at one of these September meetings to have this on the agenda.
I would expect so.
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't guarantee it, but I would expect so. I just think 45
Speculate.
days. 45 days
Right.
is a very short period of time to build a house,
Yeah.
particularly a house that has to meet the standards, even the standards that were set in the original order.
If nothing else, they have the benefit of knowing what the commission's thinking, you know, from this conversation, you know, if they decide to come forward.
We've tried to communicate that. And we'll continue to do so. The other point I'd like to make about the extension is that we should know by September 5th whether or not there has been a request to extend, so that whether or not the commission will have the opportunity to review this. You'll know soon.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Does the extension apply to our local Lowell ordinance as well? So would the Lowell rules from 2005 apply to this project as well?
That's correct.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
I have one more question. What about the project that expired? Was it just allowed to expire, or did they stop because they had the new plan?
For 450, we're talking about 51 Shirley still?
Yeah.
Construction never began. No work had begun on site from the time the order was issued in '05. And it was actually, when it was, the initial notice of intent was filed by a different party. So it's a different property owner now. So my sense is it was issued in '05, took a little while to get things going, and then the housing crisis happened and financing dried up is probably what happened. And then there was no attempt because of that to extend the project, which got us into the situation now, is that it was active, then not active, then reactivated.
So how does that work? If the project came before us by a different applicant under that order and condition, how does the current applicant get to sort of use the existing order of conditions that's being extended?
Yeah, the order of conditions runs with the land, the permit runs with the land. It's not assigned to a specific applicant, put it that way.
Yeah, I'm looking for the spot. I read the law this morning, but it seemed to me that this would not apply to a parcel that had wetlands. Is that correct? This particular parcel is floodplain, not wetland.
Correct. Yes, the development project is all
So
in the floodplain. It's
most
not
of our
wetlands.
parcels are wetland of some sort, I would say, the majority of them. So perhaps we don't have that many outstanding projects that would apply here.
So when I didn't catch that. So when you read through the Extension Act, it appeared that anything that was involved with wetlands was not automatically extended. Was that your reading of it?
Right, I wish I could find the spot here, but
That's okay. I can review it again and make sure if there's something that comes up under that does exempt projects that are within a buffer zone of wetlands or in wetlands. Yeah, we will look and see if we can find that.
Well, I read in here that anything that is subject to a federal law change is exempt from the approval. So maybe that's what,
there were three parts.
yeah.
There were three parts of exceptions, I believe, and I can't find the
Give
spot.
me one moment. There's a frequently asked
Oh,
question.
actually, I've got it right here. It's section 2 on page 62 of the law that you sent us.
So the four that I see that are exempt are permits or approvals issued by the federal government or by a state agency issued pursuant to federal law, permits issued under section 20 to 23 of chapter 40B. 40B is the inclusionary zoning law that the state is, the snob zoning law, for lack of a better term. Hunting and fishing and aquacultural approvals issued by the Division of Fisheries and Wildlife under chapter 131. And enforcement orders. So enforcement orders, certainly, people aren't granted more time on that, but, so I can imagine there's certain aquaculture approvals that would have to do with wetlands and waterways, but I don't know how often the Conservation Commission comes into interaction with those, honestly.
Perhaps you can read that over, Aaron, on page
I will.
62.
62,
And,
yeah, we'll look into it.
You almost need to have a lawyer at your elbow to read some of these laws.
I just might do that, actually. We do have some lawyers.
Could you, I mean, the
Yeah.
floodplain is an area of critical environmental concern, no?
I'm not sure.
Oh, that's like a technical
I don't,
term. I consider it critically important, but probably doesn't
I
count.
think that's a designation that's decided case by case, I'm not sure.
Hmm.
And you said it was on page 62 of the law?
62, page 62, section 2, Roman numeral 4.
Oh, yeah. Wetland as defined by section 40.
It could just be talking about the time periods involved. I'm not sure you have to go back and forth with these to get to the beginning of the sentence 3 pages back.
Yeah, run-on sentences don't seem to be of concern when legislation's drafted.
I mean, generally speaking, your exemptions are up front. Yeah,
Is there any more discussion of this particular issue? I guess it's an ongoing thing that we'll have to be discussing, maybe case by case.
Yeah, for this particular project, I expect to communicate frequently with the commission so that you are aware of what's happening, because I'm sure, based on its location, there's a lot of concern. We've had a lot of concern already about the project. So just to try to keep you all informed, we'll be emailing, I'm sure, as things progress. And as I said, for the next meeting, unless it's another, quote, I suppose, emergency, we'll have a list of projects that might be, well, at least would fall under this, eligible under this extension.
Good, thank you. Next, Aaron, I guess, is going to report to us about enforcement activities along Lexington Ave and at 525 Pawtucket Boulevard.
Yeah, if I can find, I had a couple printouts. So there was more than a couple, there was about 3 concerns raised over the last couple of weeks about projects in the floodplain. Well, 2 of them really are projects, but some activity that has occurred. Actually, in this general vicinity, it all seems to be in the Lexington, Malden, Shirley Ave area of Pawtucketville. One of them had to do with some tree and shrub clearing that DPW is doing at the intersection of Malden and Lexington Ave. And I'm just going to hand out a couple aerials here. So this is a fairly typical of the streets division of DPW, is to clear shrubs and overhanging vegetation that obstructs views in streets. In this case, I personally had happened to be out there a little before the clearing happened, and you couldn't see the street sign, and part of the street was covered. So I can imagine why that there was a request put to DPW to do this. Typically, what they do is you can kind of see in this aerial. There's a top left is a wetland. There's the barrier on the north side of what is Malden. Malden is the east-west street. The north-south is Lexington Ave. Usually they would just trim limbs and shrubs right along the edge or just back of the edge of pavement. In this case, someone had taken a bobcat and pushed back vegetation and some soil approximately in this area that I marked out about 10 to 15 feet from the edge of pavement, which is more than they like to do for some reason.
Did you say this was DPW that did this?
Correct, yeah. So I got a call and met with them on site. My recommendation was to just have them pull back some of the material. There's some soil that has piled up about 10 feet, like I said, 10 to 15 feet back from the edge of pavement. Pull it back, regrade it flat. It's a fairly flat area where there was clearing. You'll notice, though, the lines there is topography, the 2-foot topography lines that as it gets towards the wetland area, it's a fairly steep grade. It's heavily vegetated, so right now, I've been out there 3 times and haven't seen any kind of erosion, but I wanted to just review this with the Conservation Commission before we settled on a short-term solution. My initial recommendation was to just take out all the material that's piled up, grade it flat as it was, and then seed it with maybe hydro seed to keep it from doing any.
What is this material? You mean the vegetation is piled up?
Some soil, some limbs and vegetation that was, from the cutting. There's also some dumping, like there's a tire in there, and some other trash that they would remove as a part of that. But it's mostly just the little bits of topsoil and shrubs that were cleared out.
I would think the topsoil should remain. It probably will revegetate itself.
Sure.
If that's the case.
Sure. The main question is if the commission wished the DPW to go through a RDA process, or if the solution that we lay out tonight is adequate to make sure that any activity that was taken there was not going to impact the jurisdictional area.
Well, the DPW can do general street maintenance without coming before us, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
And they probably were actually still in the right-of-way of the street. The street is only paved about 14 feet wide right there.
That's correct. In fact, on the aerial there, this is GIS, so it's not surveyed, but you'll see the kind of orange dotted line is kind of the limit of the right-of-way. It's almost the top area of that I marked. So the work was either well within the right-of-way or right up to the edge of the right-of-way.
But I would definitely think that area, the vegetation should be removed, or else it'll cause trouble in the future, and definitely smoothed off and stabilized in some way.
Okay.
We probably could have a motion to that, or let's take comments first from anyone else.
I don't think we should make them do an RDA. I think we're all on the same team here, and, we're all. No, we should not. No, yeah. Maybe we could maybe set up a plan where if they do clear and they know they're in a floodplain, maybe they notify Aaron just to keep communication going with the city.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's necessary. We're all on the same team here, sort of thing.
Okay, so perhaps we could have 2 motions, one to the effect, is that a motion, Ms. Vedra?
So motion for.
That the DPW be in communication with conservation in areas that are in the floodplain or near wetlands as far as maintenance, planned maintenance before it occurs.
Yep.
Do we
But
have a
it-
second on that?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion passes.
I would though if they, let's say if they don't for some reason, I don't want them to be like punished or anything. I think it just to keep an open communication.
No, every once in a while, it's good to have a reminder that we exist and that they can call us and say they're going to be doing some work.
Yeah, I understand the motion, or understood the motion to mean that we would, in development services, set up a line of communication so that DPW is aware that they should at least just give us a heads up in the case it's in a floodplain or near a floodplain, or ask, so we can know going into this and you know, we don't have any concerned citizens. There was a citizen who saw the work and was rather surprised, but.
Is there like, could you guys quickly give them like a quick map so they just know where
Oh,
things are?
absolutely, yep,
I'm sure they already do, but just,
yeah,
okay.
yes, we certainly can do that, yep.
So next, perhaps we could have a motion that addresses the remediation of this particular corner, which we can pass on to DPW.
Has enforcement been issued, or?
Eric. Regrading's already taken place. I think the issue was there may have been some leftover vegetative debris scattered about.
Yeah, correct. There's some vegetated debris that's kind of pushed back a little bit off the edge of pavement with the dumping, the tire, and there was a couple other like plastic. I don't know what it was, toys or what.
Off of the motion, if it's, the regrading's already been done, to finish the cleanup, you know, get rid of the loose vegetation and the tires and.
And what about revegetating or erosion control of some sort?
It's flat, you said?
It's the area that was cleared is flat. Behind it, it does grade down towards the water fairly quickly, but it's pretty flat where the clearing had occurred. Yeah. And there's between the wetland and the closest piece of the clearing, there's at least 15 feet of pretty thick vegetation. So it's pretty stable. It's a stable bank at least. Yeah.
Now, you're talking here a time that we have record low water levels right now. That particular body of water is usually right up to the edge of the road.
Then it would be much
So
closer.
should we get the fall rains, as we sometimes do, that could be an erosion issue right there.
I'm sure DPW has highway grade seed mix.
I expect they do, yes.
I would say scattering of that, you know, in the area where it's been regraded to just kind of get some sort of anchoring of the soil matrix. Probably be prudent and simple to do.
So the motion, if I can rephrase a little, would be to remove vegetative debris and hopefully man-made debris and grade smooth and cover with a vegetative seed mix.
That is correct.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Do we have any, we had two other spots in that neighborhood, did we not?
Yeah, this was probably the most involved, so we got the hard one out of the way first, at least at this point. There was another property on Lexington Ave that we received a complaint or a concern. There was apparently some sand that was moved in and placed on the property in the front yard over a weekend, a couple weekends ago. I don't know how much. We've attempted to contact the property owner to let him know the correct process for doing any kind of work or fill. Have been unable to contact them directly, so a letter has gone out, a notice to inform them of the responsibilities of homeownership in a floodplain, and that any kind of fill, which placement of sand in the front yard is fill, would require a notice of intent filing, and that we would ask that they contact us immediately so that we could remedy the issue. This is, what we've sent out is not an enforcement order, more of an informational this needs to be fixed, and no, you don't know where it's likely you didn't understand that there's certain requirements in the floodplain, but we'll work with you to resolve that,
Yeah.
whether it's removing the material or coming through a notice of intent.
What's the magnitude of the, so is it small?
It's really hard to tell. There's about, I would say, between a 30 and 40 square foot area in the front yard where the sand was spread out next to a driveway. As to depth, it could be, a couple inches deep.
The only reason I bring it up is there's an alternative to the notice of intent. Could we do an RDA and then issue a -3 determination?
That's certainly an option. That's certainly an option.
I'm just trying to think of a way to streamline. I mean, if ultimately the homeowner responds to the letter, rather than dragging them through the lengthy process of a notice of intent, I think you could serve the purpose of making them aware of the responsibilities of owning land within a floodplain, and then kind of close the loop through a RDA.
Right.
With the commission, if the commission chooses to kind of support a -3 determination, assuming, of course, the scope of the sand placement out there is small.
Well, I
Find
think,
out what they're doing with the sand?
I think the issue is that we want them to come in and explain what their plan is and why this occurred.
Exactly. In the letter that was sent out, what I'll do is I'll upload the letter to the box so that the commission can review it. We didn't dictate what the process should be, because, again, we don't really know the scope of the work. It could be 2 cubic yards, it could be 50 cubic yards. Well, it's not going to be 50 cubic yards, but it could be a lot. It could be enough to
My
set up
sense
an
was that it
open-
was much less than a dump truck load full. It might have been like a pickup truck
Yeah,
load full of
I-
sand.
That sounds accurate to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so hopefully we will hear from them directly. That would be great, so that we can deal with it expeditiously. The next step, if we don't hear anything and we're not able to make contact, we'll send out a more forceful letter. So, and the third and final was a general request from at least, I'd say, one resident in the neighborhood of Pawtuckaville with respect to underground storage tanks. And the question came up specifically to 525 Pawtucket Boulevard on whether or not there was a maintenance and operation report submitted with the order or with the notice of intent application, and if there was any requirements with that order of conditions for reporting on the maintenance report. So that set off us to do some reviewing and some researching into the project. This is, by the way, the 2 residential towers that are right on the boulevard, right next to Dunkin' Donuts. The order of condition was issued, I want to say, around 2001. The project was basically complete around 2003 to 5. Actually, pardon me, I think it was, the notice of intent was submitted in 2001. The order was issued in 2003. Construction was complete near 2005. This project, again, went through the housing crisis doldrums. It was repossessed by the bank, went to auction, and was bought primarily by Princeton Property. So one building is owned by a real estate firm that rents out one side. The other is mostly condo units. Anyhow, there was a special condition in this case that a maintenance report be developed and that it be submitted for the commission to review at least 3 times after the completion of construction. It appears to never have happened. So I've reached out to the project manager for Princeton Properties to review to see if they do have a maintenance plan, and first just check the site and make sure basic maintenance is happening. There's a retention pond on the northeast corner of the property, a smaller swale retention area on the north end as well. And then there is one underground storage tank, but this storage tank has to do with flood capacity. This was approved at that time. They have been mowing and maintaining all the outlets and inlets, catch basins. They don't have it written up formally, but what they had what we had discussed was having them put it on paper, show us what their maintenance plan is, and they had suggested waiting to the fall, because the fall is when they clean out the catch basins, to provide the report to the conservation commissions, because then they can report on any kind of oil and sediment as a part of that report. And I said I would take that to you and see if that was sufficient. I feel, just based on my inspection with them, with the property managers, that they are maintaining the site pretty well. I obviously didn't get a look in the catch basins or the underground tank, but it seems overall that the surface infrastructure dealing with stormwater is maintained well. So it may be worth waiting until to the fall to get a full report.
Was the underground tank and its maintenance referred to in the order of conditions? There was a special condition, one special condition, and it mentions the underground storage tank and stormwater infrastructure. So it doesn't mention every single piece, but it's clear that the requirement was for the storage tank and the surface material, the surface infrastructure. For maintenance, was the maintenance addressed?
There was a condition that required the maintenance report. There was never one submitted. And that's what we're seeking from them now, to provide that.
Now, these particular tanks, I can't recall, were they the type that drain themselves?
Yes, yeah. There was a single tank. There was only one. It was on the western, it was attached to the western, or somewhat attached to the western building. There's an above ground catch basin that's raised a little bit at flood elevation, and so the idea is that obviously when it floods, the water goes into the tank to provide a little additional capacity. There's a oil and sediment separator as a part of that.
No.
But it's designed to just infiltrate into the ground once the water recedes.
So that one also infiltrates?
Yep.
Are we waiting for another report, or do you feel that was sufficient, what you've?
Well, we discussed that they provide a full report on what their maintenance plan is. I mean, they discussed it with me a little bit. They mow the detention pond, excuse me, twice a month during the growing season. The original O&M plan that's submitted with the stormwater report said twice a year. So they're doing a lot of mowing and maintaining of, again, the surface. But what I suggested that they submit is a detail of what their maintenance is for all the structures, so that it's on the record, so that the commission and staff is aware of what they're doing and can monitor that a little bit better. And then provide, as part of that report, an assessment of oil and sediment as a part of the cleaning of the catch basins. Because they were deep, I believe they were deep sump catch basins, so I imagine they would be.
Thank you. Any further discussion of?
No.
Moving on, then, we have a notification of utility maintenance activities by National Grid at Billings Street. They submitted this notification, but I understand they do not need to appear before us, and they are not here tonight.
That's correct. This is just
Is this something that we should just file, or do we need to make a motion on?
It's just something to file. It's for the commission's information, and this is what I think. I don't believe we'll get to this level with DPW where we get a formal letter and a map showing the limit of work, but this is the type of thing that I think we try to get to with DPW, just so that we know beforehand work happens, and the commission's aware of it.
I recall them doing this before for where they have to do pesticide spraying in right-of-ways and things of that nature.
Yeah, these activities are exempt, just like typical roadway, maintenance for pruning. So yeah, they're exempt, but they're required to notify the commission. So you can just read it if you like, and we'll put it on file for the record.
Yeah, I think if we did have any concerns, we could contact them, and they have attended our meetings in the past. This particular location is pretty straightforward, though, I think.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't mean to say that the commission doesn't have any ability to take any action with the utilities. If there's something there that appears beyond the scope of what's exempt, or if there needs more clarification, you have the ability to do so, but, yeah.
Any further comments on Billings Street? That brings us to the end of our agenda, unless there's any new business. Guess we can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll offer a motion to adjourn.
Second?
Seconded by
Second?
Ms. Biedron. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Adjourned.